My mother yelled at my best friend in front of everyone. "Why would you bring her to our house?" I stood up and said, "Because she's family, even if you're not." Months later, she showed up at my work, pale and begging to talk. I never thought I'd be one of those people sharing deeply personal family drama on here, but I guess when life pulls the rug out from under you, you start searching for ways to sort through the mess. A few months ago, my mom screamed at my best friend in front of my whole family. She said, "Why would you bring her to our house?" I stood up and said, "Because she's family, even if you're not." We didn't speak for months after that. And then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my job in Durham. Pale, thin, shaking. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk," she said. "I'm sick." That conversation turned my entire life upside down. Now here I am, writing this. Hoping someone out there has dealt with something similar. Because I'm torn between anger and guilt. Between history and healing. Let me back up. This didn't start in one day. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, a beautiful mountain town known for its art and hiking trails and breweries. But for me, Asheville wasn't quaint or peaceful. It was a cage. A cold, silent one with floral wallpaper and a mother who never learned how to say "I love you" without an edge in her voice. My mother, Serena, was all about appearances. Church every Sunday, makeup before breakfast, ironed tablecloths even when no one was visiting. If there was any warmth in her, I never saw it. She believed in image, not intimacy. I was her only child from her second marriage. My father, Walter, left when I was 6 and never looked back. I don't blame him. The person who really raised me, in every way that counted, was Maribel. We met when I was 12, at a middle school dance where we were the only two girls standing against the wall while everyone else pretended they weren't awkward. She made some dumb joke about the punch tasting like expired ketchup, and I laughed harder than I should have. That was it. Instant connection. We became each other's anchor. When my mom snapped about my grades or about the way I ate or the fact that I didn't stand up straight, Maribel was the one who talked me down. Her mom was a house cleaner, her dad was in and out of jail. But her home, small, cluttered, alive, was the only place I felt like I could breathe. She brought me into her world. Spanish telenovelas, late-night walks to the corner store, sharing cheap candy and whispered dreams. Her family called me Mija like I was one of them. But Serena never liked her. "She's not our kind of person," she'd mutter. "They're the type to drag you down. Our kind of people." As if suffering was a hierarchy. As if pain had a pedigree. I left Asheville for college in Greensboro at 19, and Maribel moved there too. She worked full-time waitressing while going to nursing school. She shared my one-bedroom apartment with me for 2 years. She paid half the rent and more than half of my emotional bills. We survived those years together. Breakups, empty fridges, all-nighters. There were nights we laughed until our stomachs hurt and nights we sat in silence on the kitchen floor, just needing someone else's presence. She was more than a best friend. She was family. So when my mom invited me home for Thanksgiving last year, it wasn't even a question. I told Maribel, "You're coming too." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" She said, "Family. Your family." We drove up the day before Thanksgiving. The house hadn't changed. White shutters, trimmed bushes, a porch swing no one ever used. My mother opened the door with a look on her face that froze the air. She didn't hug me. She looked over Maribel like she was something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Said, "Oh. You brought her." Not her name. Not "Hi, Maribel." Just her. Dinner was strained. Harold, my stepfather, tried to smooth things over. He was polite, as always. Kind in that quiet, tired way of a man who's been married too long to a woman he can't reach. But Serena's disapproval hung in the air like mildew. Then it happened. Maribel passed the cranberry sauce across the table. Her fingers brushed the silver serving fork. Serena snapped. Don't touch the silverware. Everyone stopped. Maribel looked confused. Sorry? That's family silver. Not for guests. She didn't even try to hide the venom in her voice. It wasn't about silver. It was about dirt. About blood. About boundaries drawn in her mind decades ago. I stood up. My hands were clenched. My voice shook, but I made sure it carried. She's family, I said. Even if you're not. Silence. Maribel stood up too, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, like she was waiting to see if I meant it. I did. We walked out. We left our plates half full and the flan she'd made untouched on the kitchen counter. I blocked my mother's number 2 days later. Weeks passed. The anger didn't fade, it calcified. Maribel didn't push me to talk about it. She just stayed close. We lived like always, working, watching bad movies, getting through the days. Then, 3 months later, she showed up at my office. Serena, I mean. I'd just finished lunch and was walking back to my desk when I saw her standing in the lobby. Her face was gray. Her hair was uncombed. No makeup. No pearls. Just hollow. She looked like someone who'd lost a war. I stopped. My heart dropped. I need to talk, she said. Please. I hesitated. But curiosity, and maybe that old need for answers, won out. We walked to a nearby coffee shop. She didn't order anything. Just sat there shaking. Then she told me. Stage 3 breast cancer. No health insurance. She'd been sick for months. Hiding it. Denying it. Hoping it would go away. I burned every bridge, she said. But I don't know who else to turn to. I stared at her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But part of me just sat there. Frozen. She kept talking. About regret. About her childhood. About how she never learned to love the right way. About how I reminded her of her mother, and how that scared her. I didn't forgive her. Not right then. But I also didn't walk away. That night, I told Maribel. She's dying, I said. Maribel was quiet. Then she asked, do you want to help her? I don't know. But we did. Or at least, we tried. We started small. A ride to her first oncology appointment. A grocery run when she was too weak to stand. Little things. Maribel was the one who suggested we take shifts. She didn't say it, but I think she knew I was torn. Torn between the voice inside me that said she hurt you, don't give her more of you, and the other voice that whispered she's still your mother. The contradiction lived in my chest like two wolves constantly gnawing at each other. At first, Serena barely acknowledged Maribel. She avoided eye contact. Never said thank you. Just quietly accepted the help, her pride tucked somewhere under the chemo blanket. But I could see her softening. Not in some grand, movie-like revelation. Just little things. The way she no longer flinched when Maribel touched her arm. How she began accepting the broth Maribel made instead of grimacing and leaving it untouched. The doctor told us it was aggressive. Stage 3, but likely metastatic. She was already thin when she came to me, but 2 weeks into treatment, she looked like wind could knock her over. Her cheeks hollowed. Her voice became raspy. But still, she fought. I remember sitting with her in the treatment room once, her hands trembling from the 4 drip, and she asked, in this brittle, almost curious tone, why did you come? It took me a moment to understand what she meant. You mean, why did I help? She nodded. I should have lied. I should have said because I love you or because you're my mother. But I didn't. I just said, because I didn't want to wonder what I could have done if I didn't. She didn't respond. Just stared out the window at the parking lot like it held all the answers she'd ever failed to give me. It was strange, being back in that house. The one I swore I'd never step foot in again. She insisted on dying at home. I won't rot in a hospital bed, she said. I didn't fight her. Harold didn't either. He looked relieved, maybe. Like all the quiet suffering he'd endured was nearing its final act. He was kind in the way you are to someone you no longer love but have shared too much life with to turn your back on. Maribel cleaned out the guest room. Washed sheets. Disinfected the bathroom. She did all the things I was too emotionally raw to do. She was a nurse now, licensed, professional, calm under pressure, but it wasn't just about care. She did it because she was the kind of person my mother never bothered to understand. She did it because that's what love looks like, even when it's undeserved. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found Maribel scrubbing a saucepan with this faraway look in her eyes. She hasn't said my name once, she murmured. I didn't know what to say. Because she was right. It stung. It made me want to scream. As the weeks passed, Serena started talking more. Little things, at first. A comment about the spring flowers. A question about my job. And then stories, real ones. Ones I'd never heard before. She talked about her own mother, who had a mean streak a mile wide. About the beatings with the belt, the forced dinners where no one was allowed to speak, the constant pressure to be perfect. I listened. Sometimes I even nodded. But I never let it excuse what she'd done to me. One afternoon, as I helped her change into a clean nightgown, she touched my wrist gently and said, I was so afraid you'd end up like me. I didn't answer. Not then. But later, while washing her sheets and folding them with Maribel, I said quietly, she thought treating me like her would keep me from becoming her. Maribel nodded, eyes soft. But you didn't. I didn't. There was one day, early April, I think, when Maribel stayed behind to cook, and I took Serena for a short drive. She wanted to see the mountains again. The Blue Ridge Parkway was still streaked with the last hints of winter, but buds were starting to show. We parked at one of the overlooks. She leaned back in her seat, eyes closed, breathing in the crisp air like it was something sacred. I hated how you loved her, she said suddenly. Maribel. It scared me. That you could love someone so completely when I couldn't even figure out how to hold your hand. It was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever get from her. I kept my eyes on the trees. It didn't scare me. It saved me. We didn't say anything else. She just stared ahead while I let the silence wrap around us like a blanket we'd both finally stopped pulling on. At night, Maribel and I would sit on the back porch while Serena slept. She's trying, in her own way, Maribel said once, cupping her mug of tea like it was the only warmth in the world. She's dying, I answered. Trying might be too late. Maribel shrugged. Maybe. But it's still something. I looked at her, at the woman who had been my sister in all but blood, who had stood by me through years of cold dinners and worse silences, who had been screamed at and shamed by the very person she was now nursing without complaint. You didn't have to do any of this, I said. She looked at me then, really looked. You didn't have to stand up for me at that dinner table either, she replied. But you did. And that's all I needed. Spring came early that year. Dogwoods bloomed like lace across the neighborhood. The air smelled like damp earth and renewal, but inside that house, time moved in slow, heavy breaths. Serena was fading. Her voice thinner, her bones more visible under her pale skin. The pain meds made her sleep most of the day, and when she was awake, she spoke in murmurs, sometimes lucid, sometimes not. Harold took to sitting out on the porch for hours. I think he didn't want to see her like that. Or maybe he just didn't know how to sit in a room with so much unraveling. I didn't blame him. I envied him, even. Maribel, on the other hand, stayed. Always. She kept track of Serena's medications, changed her bedding, massaged her legs when the cramps got bad. There was no resentment in her. No performance. She just gave. Quietly. unconditionally. It made me feel small, sometimes. Like I had spent years defining myself in contrast to my mother, saying I'll never be like her, but Maribel was showing me what true strength and grace actually looked like. Not through defiance, but through presence. Through staying. One night, just after midnight, I sat beside Serena's bed while she dozed. Her chest rose and fell so softly that I caught myself leaning in just to confirm she was still breathing. In the dark, with only the soft hum of the oxygen machine between us, she stirred. I thought being cold would make you strong, she said, eyes still closed. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, this woman who had taught me silence and caution and how to make myself small in rooms I didn't trust. I was already strong, I finally said. I just had to survive you to prove it. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded faintly, then fell back into sleep. The next day, Serena asked for Maribel directly. That had never happened before. Not once in over 15 years of knowing each other had Serena looked Maribel in the eye and acknowledged her like a person, let alone requested her presence. Maribel looked surprised when I told her. What did she say exactly? She asked. She said, "Can you ask Maribel to come sit with me?" Her exact words. Maribel took a deep breath, smoothed her scrub top, and walked into the bedroom like she'd been preparing for that moment her whole life. I didn't follow. I waited in the hallway, unsure if it was something I was meant to witness. They stayed there for 20 minutes. When Maribel came out, she didn't say much. Just wiped her eyes and went to make tea. She said she was sorry, she told me quietly later. For everything. For not seeing me. For hating that you loved me. For trying to make you doubt what you knew was right. I swallowed hard. Did it help? Maribel looked at me, her eyes soft but guarded. I didn't need it. But I think she did. The shift in Serena was subtle but unmistakable. She asked about Maribel's work. Her family. She complimented her soup. One morning, she even reached out and took Maribel's hand as she helped her into bed. No words. Just touch. But it was something. And for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother open, not fully, not brightly, but like a door cracked just wide enough to let light through. Still, the damage was there. Not undone. Just set down for a while. I kept waiting for a bigger moment. A dramatic apology. A healing speech. But life isn't a movie, and people like Serena rarely rewrite themselves completely. She softened, yes, but she didn't transform. And that had to be enough. One afternoon, I sat with her on the back porch. The same place she used to drink her tea in silence when I was younger, back when I'd peek through the window wondering what she was thinking. She was wrapped in a blanket, her eyes closed, her face turned toward the sun. You used to sit here for hours, I said. When I was little. I know, she murmured. It was the only place that didn't ask anything of me. I nodded. I understood that now, in a way I hadn't before. You scared me, growing up, I admitted. Not because you hit me or yelled, though you did both sometimes. But because I never knew if I was wanted. She didn't open her eyes. Just whispered, you were. But I didn't know how to show it without breaking something. It was the closest thing to a truth she'd ever offered me. And for once, I believed her. Later that week, Maribel brought over her mother's recipe for caldo de pollo. The house is filled with the scent of garlic and cilantro and simmering chicken. Serena asked for seconds. She ate slowly but with real appetite, like she remembered what comfort could taste like. After dinner, Maribel and I sat in the living room, each of us holding a glass of wine. I looked at her, really looked, and wondered what my life would have looked like without her. She sees you now, I said quietly. Maribel took a sip, then smiled. That's nice. But I saw you long before she did. That's what matters. Days passed. Serena's energy dwindled. The doctor adjusted her pain meds. She spoke less and slept more. The hospice nurse suggested we start preparing for the end, not in words, but in tone, in the way her eyes met mine just a little longer than they needed to. Harold wept, finally. Quietly, in the hallway, where he thought no one could hear him. Maribel and I stayed by her side every day, every night. There was no miracle coming. We all knew that. But something unexpected had already happened. Not in the way cancer stories usually go. There was no redemption arc, no sudden turn of joy. But in the quiet erosion of her defenses, in the unspoken apologies, in the way she let us be near her without armor, I realized healing doesn't always look like happiness. Sometimes it just looks like a wound that stops bleeding. The last week was the slowest and the sharpest. Serena drifted between sleep and a heavy, murmured wakefulness. The kind where she would open her eyes and look at me, not quite seeing me, and whisper things like, "Don't let her go." I never knew if she meant Maribel, or if she was slipping back into her past. I didn't ask. We rotated shifts. Harold took mornings, often sitting silently with her, nodding off in the chair beside the bed. I took the afternoon off. Maribel stayed through the evenings and most nights. It was unspoken, we all knew those final moments were approaching, like a storm you can smell before you see it. Then, one Thursday morning, Serena sat up unexpectedly. It was the most lucid she'd been in days. Her eyes clear, her voice soft but sharp with intention. She looked at me first. "I want to talk to her," she said. "You mean Maribel?" She nodded. "Alone." I hesitated, but eventually called Maribel into the room and quietly stepped out, standing just outside the cracked door, hearing only muffled voices, unable to make out the words. When Maribel came out almost an hour later, her face wasn't red or tear-streaked, it was composed. Serene, even. She walked past me into the kitchen and began making tea like it was any other day. She said what she needed to say, was all she offered. I didn't ask for more. 3 days later, Serena slipped into a deeper sleep and didn't wake up for nearly 36 hours. Then one evening, as twilight pressed up against the window, her chest rose. Then fell. And that was it. No gasping. No drama. Just stillness. It was Harold who whispered, "She's gone," and broke the spell. But here's the thing. She wasn't. Not quite. The funeral was private. Serena had insisted on no church service. "Just family," she said. Which I found ironic, given her lifelong obsession with image. Harold handled most of it. I didn't care about the flowers or the music. I didn't cry when they lowered her down. My grief had leaked out in pieces long before that final day. Grief, for me, had been a series of tiny deaths, the mother I wished for, the apologies I never got as a child, the silence that lived between us like a third person in the room. But what she left behind. That's where the revenge part begins. A week after the funeral, we got a call from her attorney. She'd left a will. I expected it to be simple, whatever was in the house to Harold, maybe a few heirlooms to cousins I hadn't seen in years. I didn't expect anything. She had never given me much of anything, emotionally or materially. We met at the attorney's office in a small building just outside Asheville. It was raining hard. Maribel came with me, not out of curiosity, but out of that quiet loyalty she always carried. Mr. Rollins, the attorney, cleared his throat and began reading. "To my husband, Harold, I leave the home and our joint savings account." Fine. "To my daughter, I leave my wedding ring from my first marriage, and the antique silver tea set she always hated." I raised an eyebrow. That was like leaving me the ghost of every tense dinner we ever had. But then he paused. "To Maribel Soto, I leave my mother's emerald brooch, the $48,000 left in my personal bank account, and full ownership of my family's lake house in Brevard." I blinked. So did Maribel. "Wait, what?" she whispered. Rollins nodded. "It's all valid." Your mother changed her will 3 weeks before her passing. Signed, witnessed, notarized. I turned to Maribel, stunned. The lake house was her prized possession, kept locked up, barely used, reserved for rare occasions and carefully selected guests. It was an extension of her pride. I had only been there twice in my whole life. And she left it to Maribel. We didn't say anything in the car on the way back to Durham. Just stared out the windows, the rain making soft trails across the glass. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house. It was about what it meant. My mother had spent years rejecting Maribel, trying to drive a wedge between us, dismissing her as not our kind of people. And in the end, she handed over the most meaningful parts of her legacy to the very person she had tried so hard to keep out. It wasn't love. Not quite. It was recognition. It was surrender. And that, for me, was enough. We drove up to the lake house the following weekend. It was still exactly as I remembered it. Quiet, elegant, filled with the scent of cedar and distant memories. Serena had kept it pristine, walls full of photographs that didn't include me, shelves of books with her handwriting in the margins, antique vases positioned just so. Maribel walked through it slowly, respectfully. She didn't touch anything at first. Then, in the sitting room, she turned to me and asked, "Do you want to keep this?" She pointed to a dusty photograph of Serena and her siblings as children, framed in silver. I shook my head. "No. But I think you should." She raised her eyebrow. "Me? You earned this place. Every inch of it." Maribel stared at the photo a moment longer, then gently took it off the shelf. "Then maybe it's time this house had new stories. Ones with joy in them." We spent the weekend cleaning, clearing out, reclaiming. We painted the walls. We played music. We drank wine on the porch Serena never used. We danced barefoot in the kitchen. And for the first time in my life, I felt something inside me unclench. Not because she died. But because we won. Not with spite. Not with revenge dressed in bitterness. But by living well. Fully. Loudly. We took what she tried to withhold, love, warmth, belonging, and built something she couldn't break. In the end, she gave Maribel the keys. But we'd already found the way in.